Now, militant group Hamas has accepted a proposal for a truce that was put forward by mediators Qatar and Egypt in the 7-month-old war in Gaza.
Now, as Israel renewed an order for civilians in Rafah to evacuate ahead of a long-threatened invasion of the city, Israel is continuing with its offensive in Rafah. Now, the proposal includes 3 phases of ceasefire, each stage lasting for 42 days. The proposal would see an end to Israel's war in Gaza, as well as the release of Israeli captives held in the enclave and the Palestinians held in Israeli prisons. While on the development side, the last phase, it involves a 3 to 5 year reconstruction plan for Gaza and perhaps most significantly an end to the Israeli blockade of the enclave.
Meanwhile, the United States, which is also involved in the negotiations along with Qatar and Egypt, said it is reviewing the Hamas response with its West Asian allies.
So I can confirm that Hamas has issued a response. We are reviewing that response now and discussing it with our partners in the region. As you know, Director Burns is in the region working on this in real time. We will be discussing this response with our partners over the coming hours.
Hamas' announcement was met with celebrations in Gaza as Palestinians hoped it will finally bring an end to a nearly 7-month-long war in which Israel has killed at least 34,700 people in the Palestinian territory.
However, Israel's response has been less enthusiastic. Israel says the proposal falls short of its demands. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Hamas's proposal was far from Israel's basic requirements, but negotiators will continue discussions. The advancement in truce deal comes as Israel continues to emphasize its desire to attack Rafah in southern Gaza in their bid to completely defeat Hamas.
Now, on Monday night, intense Israeli air attacks took place in southern Gaza. Reports suggest the strikes were virtually continuous for 30 minutes. The Israeli strikes have left at least 5 people dead in Rafah. On the other hand, Israel's longtime ally, the United States, has warned them of against invading the southern Gaza city. US President Joe Biden again urged Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu against launching an offensive in Rafah.
Biden had earlier warned Netanyahu in April that invading Rafah would be a mistake. Biden also discussed developments at a closed-door lunch with King Abdullah II of Jordan, which has relations with Israel but also a large Palestinian community. According to a Jordanian statement, the king has asked Biden to intervene with Israel, saying that an Israeli attack on Rafah, it threatens to lead to a new massacre.
But hours after the call between Biden and Netanyahu, Israel continued its second warning in a day for Palestinians to evacuate Rafah and said it is preparing for a ground invasion where more than 1 million people uprooted by the 7-month war have been crowded together. And we're, of course, talking about Rafah here.
All right, to discuss where things stand at the moment further, we're now being joined by Colonel David B. DeRoche, Professor of Near East South Asia Center for Strategic Studies, National Defense University. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Now, Colonel, I want to begin by asking, we earlier saw Hamas was disagreeing to some of the terms and conditions that were put forward. Now it's Israel. The back and forth essentially continues. And this, of course, comes amid the latest flare-up and the exchange of fire between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. What do you think are the main points of contention at the moment, and where do things stand as per you when it comes to the truce deal?
Yeah, so the first issue is the hostages held by Hamas. I think that Israel thinks that there are probably fewer hostages still alive than are generally known. And they feel that, I think that their guess is that if they accept agreement here, they won't get as many hostages back as they're expecting to get. So that's the first problem. The second problem is I think there's a lack of goodwill. I don't think that Israel feels that if it calls off the offensive and allows Hamas's military capacity, I think 4 battalions and a significant number of facilities in Rafah, if they allow that to survive, As soon as they withdraw, that will be directed against Israel. So that's the second issue. The third issue is just the nature of the mobilization that Israel undertakes here, which is that Israel is suffering economically from having so many people in the armed forces. If they stand down those forces, it will be very expensive, very difficult to get them back again if this agreement falls apart. And so I think that given where they are and given Netanyahu's rhetoric, I think that they will reject this agreement, and I think they will continue with the Rafah assault.
Colonel, just taking it further from there, as you mentioned, they are continuing with the Rafah offensive. Now, US feels the deal is absolutely achievable, but with Israel pressing ahead with its strikes on Rafah, do you feel that increases or decreases the chances of arriving at a truce deal hereafter?
I honestly think that the military logic for a Rafah offensive has been, in terms of Israeli interests, that it's really unanswerable. I know that the United States doesn't want to see this because of the civilian casualties that are inevitable, particularly given that you have so many dislocated civilians in the area. But I think that Netanyahu's security objectives, which is the destruction of Hamas as a military organization and ensuring that they cannot again attack within Israel, he can't achieve those objectives without physically occupying Rafah, destroying the leadership of Hamas, destroying the underground infrastructure and the other infrastructure that are still in Rafah. So I think that even if all of Israel's terms were met, and I don't think they have been, it would still be unlikely that we'd see a cessation of operations.
Well, it remains to be seen now how the truce deal continues, because we've seen both sides disagreeing to the terms, as it's not been as per their side, of course. But both sides have been open to negotiations, so there is still hope there. Thank you so much for joining in. That was Colonel David B. DeRoche joining us from Washington, D.C. Always a pleasure speaking with you, sir.
Thank you.